Names were a kind of law in Ravencrest, older than iron and sharper than any blade. A true name spoken beneath sunrise did not simply describe a person, it placed them inside the pack's memory, inside its obligations, inside the sacred arithmetic of who must be protected and who could be sacrificed. Theodora Starfall had learned the inverse truth first. When a name was spit rather than spoken, when it was followed by curse and blame, it became a sentence. At dawn, chained in the sun court with frost still silvering the flagstones, she discovered how much power could also hide inside a name withheld. The court opened to the eastern cliffs, a crescent of black stone columns veined with old moon runes. Torches guttered in the wind, though the sun had already climbed above the ridgeline, and smoke from cedar braziers mixed with the crowd's breath until the air tasted bitter. 6 visiting pack standards snapped overhead. Ravencrest warriors lined the outer ring in bronze-scaled armor, wolves pacing beside them in leashed silence. Theodora stood below the royal dais with chain at her wrists and another fixed to the collar at her throat, as visible as any warning post. Her brand had healed crookedly across her left shoulder. Disgraced healer. Oathbreaker. She knew each contour of scar tissue better than the lines of her own palm. A herald struck his staff once. Alpha King Alistair calls witness. He stepped forward in a dark cloak clasped with the crown sigil, expression unreadable, jaw set too tightly for ceremony. Rumor painted him as ruthless, as distant, as a sovereign who survived winter raids by measuring compassion like rations. From where she stood, Theodora saw only controlled strain, his right hand flexing once at his side, then stilling. His voice carried cleanly across the court. The moon has named me a mate. For the stability of allied borders and the safety of our dens, the binding rite will be held at next sunrise. Shock moved through the gathered packs like a wind-swept field. A binding this quickly meant emergency. It meant fractured treaties, challenged legitimacy, and fear sharp enough to bite. Alistair inhaled to continue. His gaze dropped from the nobles, from the elders, from the rival alphas standing in wolf fur mantles, and landed on Theodora. The sentence broke there. He opened his mouth, said nothing. The silence swelled. 1 heartbeat. 2. 12. Nikolai Ashford smiled first. He stood at the front of the visiting delegation, broad-shouldered and immaculate in storm-gray leather, his silver ring glinting as he spread his hands in theatrical concern. Your Majesty announces destiny, yet withholds the name that proves it. Is Ravencrest ruled by moon law or by private appetite? Murmurs rose, some uncertain, some eager. Nikolai angled his body so every banner could see him. We all know the female in chains, the healer sold to you as atonement after your late Luna's loss. If this is the truth of your court, then say it. If it is not, then your unnamed mate is a ghost, and we are being asked to bleed for a lie. A council elder hissed, loud enough for the lower tiers. Child killer. Another voice followed. Cursed wombs follow her. Theodora locked her knees to keep from folding. She had treated sprains, births, fever storms, and gut wounds through 2 winters, but one miscarriage had shattered every oath she carried. No one had asked why the late Luna's cramps began after new grain shipments. No one had allowed a second examination. Her own alpha sold her within 3 days, calling it restitution in front of witnesses who did not meet her eyes. The chain at her throat tugged when the guard shifted position. Metal burned cold against skin. Inside, her thoughts fractured and raced. I am breathing. Keep breathing. Do not look for mercy in men who already chose the story they needed. Do not ask for fairness from a crowd that fears hunger more than truth. You have survived this long by counting what is still yours. Your hands, your memory, the old diagnostic prayers, the scent of moonwort when it is fresh and when it is spoiled. They can call you cursed and still need your knowledge when fever comes. They can bury your name and still need your skill by nightfall. If he speaks me now, I become the target on every border. If he does not, I remain the scapegoat they can trade. There is no clean road. There is only the next breath and the next. Alistair's voice returned, lower now, dangerous in its restraint. I refuse discussion of my mate's identity in a politicized assembly. Nikolai laughed once, without warmth. Refusal is not authority. It is fear wearing a crown. Alistair did not answer him. He turned to his captains. The accused healer is remanded to royal hold until Moon Tribunal. No private questioning, no sentence before witness. The wording was precise, protective on its surface, fragile in practice. As guards hauled Theodora from the courtyard, insults followed like thrown stones. Moon-blighted. Let her rot. Do not let her touch pregnant females. She kept her head down and counted steps, because counting was the only order left to her. 12 to the archway, 22 down the inner ramp, 9 to the iron gate beneath the east barracks. The lower hold smelled of wet straw, rust, and lye. Rain began while they locked her in, drumming against the slit window high above the cell corridor. By mid-morning, water had crept under the threshold and chilled her bare feet. No food came, no hearing notice, only changing shifts and whispers beyond the bars. Near noon, 2 men stopped outside her cell, believing the storm loud enough to hide them. Elder Varen wants her moved before moonrise, one said. King's order says no private questioning. A scoff. Then call it transfer, black stair, scribal room. She signs confession, all done. And if she refuses? Everyone refuses once. The second man went quiet. Then, Ashford's envoy asked for proof by dawn. Footsteps retreated. Theodora stayed crouched in the corner until the tremor in her hands eased. The black stair ended beneath the old armory where no witnesses went after dark. Scribal room meant forged records and signatures pressed under threat. Proof by dawn meant they needed her guilty before the tribunal could breathe. The breaking point was not dramatic. No lightning, no prophecy, just arithmetic. If she stayed, she disappeared by night. If she vanished, guilt became law. If guilt became law, every cramping pregnancy in winter would carry her name, while the true cause spread unchecked. A guard brought a single bucket at dusk, younger than the others, his attention split between her and the dice game down the corridor. He unlocked the hatch, shoved it through, and leaned close enough for stale ale to sour the air. Sign tonight, he muttered. Makes it easier. For who? She asked. His smile was thin. Not you. When he turned to relock the hatch, she moved. Not fast, not strong, just exact. Her chain was longer than standard because they expected a healer, not a fighter. She wrapped it once around his wrist and yanked downward with her whole weight. He stumbled against the bars, keys clattering loose. She caught the ring before it hit the puddled floor. He swore, reaching for her collar. She drove the bucket into his shin, slipped beneath his arm, and bolted into the corridor before alarm could form into words. Shouts erupted behind her. Metal rang. A bell started somewhere above. Then another answered from the western tower. She ran. Up service stairs slick with tracked rain. Through a storage gallery stacked with winter salt. Across an open bridge where wind slapped water into her face, and her chain snapped against stone with each stride. Ravencrest rose in layers of slate roofs, torchlight, and narrow passages she knew from years carrying bundles of dried bark and stitched bandages. She chose routes by smell and memory, Tanner's smoke to avoid the barracks, rosemary to find the old kitchen court, lamp oil to mark the infirmary wing. By the time she reached the north cloister, her lungs burned and one ankle throbbed where iron had bitten skin raw. Wolves howled from the lower kennels, answering the alarm. She cut through a chapel ruin and nearly fell on the broken steps, catching herself on wet stone at the last instant. A captain rounded the corner with 2 soldiers. He saw the chain collar, cursed, and lifted his blade. She raised both hands. I am unarmed. Check your south stores for moonrot before another female loses a litter. Quiet, he snapped, advancing. From the infirmary doors came a new sound. Stretchers, urgent orders, someone crying for hot water. Border skirmish wounded were arriving. Theodora made a choice that felt like stepping off a cliff. She ran toward the noise. Inside, the hall blazed with lamplight and chaos. Wet cloaks hit the floor. Healers shouted for clean linen. A young soldier on the nearest cot convulsed with fever while two apprentices argued over dosage. Move, she said, voice cracking, then harder. Move if you want him alive. The apprentices froze, startled by command from a chained prisoner. The captain caught up, hand clamping on her arm. A second grip closed around her wrist from the other side, steady and unyielding. A man in a common soldier's tunic, rain-dark hair plastered to his brow, mud on his boots, brown eyes fixed on hers with startling intensity. Let her work, he said. The captain stiffened. Healers under royal hold. The soldier did not release her. Then consider this a royal order. The captain's fingers tightened on Theodora's arm, as if he could hold authority in his grip. But the man in the soldier's tunic did not even raise his voice. He simply turned his head, and something in his stillness shifted the room's balance. Release her, he said. A healer at the far table looked up too quickly, recognized him, and dropped her gaze to the bandages in her hands. The captain saw that movement, then another from an older medic who stepped back and bowed without being asked. His expression blanched. My king, he said under his breath, and let Theodora go as if her skin had scorched him. The words landed like a struck bell. Apprentices froze with kettles half lifted. A wolf stretched beneath a bench and went flat against the stone, ears pinned in submission. Theodora stared at the man beside her, at rainwater dripping from his jaw to the collar of a common tunic, at mud on boots no king should have worn in public. Alistair did not look toward his kneeling captain. His attention stayed on her. You said moonrot in the grain stores. Explain while you work. Fear and exhaustion crashed together so hard she tasted iron. She should have knelt. She should have lowered her eyes. She should have remembered every rule for surviving powerful men. Instead, she turned toward the nearest cot where the young soldier convulsed under a wool blanket and said, If he seizes again, he bites through his tongue. I need a wedge wrapped in cloth, fever bark paste, and boiled water not from tonight's cistern. No one moved. Alistair's tone sharpened. Now. The infirmary snapped back into motion. One apprentice ran for the storeroom, another stumbled toward the stove. Theodora set both hands on the soldier's temples, feeling heat radiate through sweat-slick skin. Too hot, too rapid. His scent carried infection and stale grain both, a wrongness she had learned to separate by instinct and practice long before anyone trusted her with rank. She worked through the tremor in her fingers. Hold his shoulders, not his throat. If you pin his airway, he dies. A broad-shouldered guard replaced the panicked apprentice at once. Theodora mixed powdered bark with water in a chipped mortar, grinding until paste turned from gray to bitter green. She checked the soldier's gums, inflamed, checked his belly, rigid cramping. She looked up at Alistair. What did they eat on patrol? He answered without pause. Hard bread from southern stores and dried venison. Shared kettle? Yes. Any pregnant females in that patrol camp? He gave a single tight nod. 2. Then send riders. Immediately. Isolate every sack stamped with southern lot marks and burn the dust at the bottom of each bin. Do not feed it to wolves. Do not toss it for birds. The captain hesitated. Burning grain in winter. Alistair did not glance at him. You heard her. The captain fled. Theodora spread the paste beneath the soldier's tongue and pressed two knuckles to the pressure point below his sternum, counting under her breath until the worst of the shaking eased. Her knees threatened to buckle when adrenaline began to drain, and she caught herself on the edge of the cot. Alistair moved closer. Sit. If I sit, I sleep. Her voice was ragged. If I sleep, someone signs my confession for me. His jaw hardened at that. Who ordered transfer to the Black Stair? She met his gaze directly, because if she looked away now, she would not look back. A guard said Elder Varen wanted it done before moonrise. Ashford's envoy asked for proof by dawn. Around them, the scrape of bowls and rush of feet continued, but a new silence settled beneath the noise. Alistair's expression did not change, yet the scent in the room shifted toward storm and iron. Hours remained until the moonrise tribunal, and for the first time since sunrise, Theodora watched fear cross faces that were not her own. He spoke to the infirmary without raising his voice. From this breath forward, Theodora Starfall is under crown protection. No one questions her outside witness. No one moves her without my seal. The title and her full name together struck her harder than the chain collar at her throat. She had not heard them paired with respect in months. A child cried in the adjoining corridor. Not an infant. Old enough for words, frightened enough to forget them. Theodora turned toward the sound automatically. Two wolf pups sat on a bench near the doorway, both wrapped in overlarge cloaks, one with a split lip, one with a bandaged ankle. Border skirmish survivors, orphaned by the look in their eyes. She crossed to them and knelt slowly so she would not tower. Did either of you eat from the patrol bread? The older pup shook his head. The younger stared at the chain on her wrists, then at the brand edge visible above her torn collar. You're the cursed healer, he whispered. The words were small and apologetic, borrowed from adults who no longer had to answer for them. Theodora swallowed once, then nodded because lying to children was another kind of harm. I am the healer. Curses are for stories. Show me your ankle. He extended it with solemn trust that almost undid her. The joint was swollen but stable. She rewrapped the splint, gentler than she had been handled in weeks, and handed him a strip of honey root for pain. The older pup watched every movement, measuring danger and finding none. When she rose, the room tilted. Alistair was suddenly there, not touching, close enough to steady if she fell. You are shaking. I ran half the fortress in chains. You should have been fed. She gave a tired sound that almost resembled a laugh. That concern arrives late, Your Majesty. His answer came quietly. Not late, hidden. A stretcher slammed through the doors with two more wounded from the lower pass, and urgency surged again. Theodora moved to meet them, but Alistair caught her wrists this time, firm and careful, as if asking permission through contact rather than taking it. 1 minute. Breathe. She opened her mouth to argue. Instead, her fingers closed around his wrist in return. The world narrowed to skin. Heat surged from his pulse into her palm, not fever, not ordinary warmth, but a molten current that raced up her arm and struck the base of her spine like flint to tinder. Every nerve lit in answering lines. Breath stuttered in her chest. Sound blurred. The clatter of metal, the cries, the rain against shutters all dropped behind a rushing silence where only his heartbeat remained. Heavy and impossible to mistake, matching hers, overtaking it, teaching it a new rhythm. Alistair inhaled sharply, the breath cutting through his teeth. Brown drained from his irises as amber bled outward in a fierce ring, predator and king and ancient oath looking through a human face that could no longer pretend to be merely human. He forced the shift down with visible effort, pupils tightening, color dimming but not disappearing. Theodora could not release him. Her chain fell from numb fingers and struck the stones with a clear metallic crack that turned heads across the room. Still, she stood locked to him by that burning thread under skin. Inside, her mind shattered into too many truths at once. This is him. This is the scent from the corridor outside my cell at second watch, cedar and winter smoke and rain on iron. This is the presence I felt and never saw, the one that paused outside my door and left before dawn. This is the king who could end me with one decree, and the male my body has known in silence, long before my mind would let me name it. I should pull away. I should remember chains and brands, and how quickly crowds become knives. I should hate him for waiting until now. But my pulse is answering him like it has been waiting through every sleepless night, and the hollow place I called survival is filling with terrifying, aching recognition. If this is a trap, it is the cruelest one ever built. If it is true, I am already falling. Alistair dropped to one knee in front of her. The motion stunned the room into complete stillness. Kings did not kneel in infirmaries, not to prisoners, not to disgraced healers in chains. His voice was rough, almost reverent. Theodora. Her name in his mouth sounded like a vow, not a verdict. A tremor traveled through her body, not from cold. Instinct sharpened to a knife edge. Awareness prickled along her spine so intensely she felt each breath he took before he drew it. She could smell rain in his hair, old scars beneath his skin, the faint metallic trace of blood where his knuckles had split during the winter raids. She had memorized that scent in the dark without understanding why it eased her terror for one stolen hour each night. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, directly over racing pulse. "Mine," he whispered. The word barely audible, yet it landed through her like a bell struck in bone. She hated how quickly the answer rose, hated the relief braided through it, hated that truth did not ask permission from pride. "Home," she breathed. The nearest apprentice dropped a bowl. It shattered, water and ceramic spraying across stone. No one bent to clean it. Alistair stood in one fluid motion and faced the room, amber still banked in his eyes like coals under ash. "Witness," he said. "You all saw." An elder medic recovered first, pressing fist to heart. "Witnessed." Others echoed, uneven at first, then stronger. "Witnessed, witnessed." The captain who had tried to drag her back to the cell sank to both knees, forehead nearly touching the floor. "Forgive me, my king." Alistair's gaze stayed cold on him. "You will ask her." The captain turned, swallowed, and bowed to Theodora with visible shame. She did not answer. She was still trying to stand inside a body that no longer felt solely hers. Outside, thunder rolled over the eastern cliffs. Rain intensified, drumming the roof hard enough to vibrate the lamp hooks. Alistair reached for the iron at her throat, then stopped an inch away, asking with his eyes. She gave one unsteady nod. He took the key from the captain, unlocked the collar, and lowered it into his own hands as if disarming a relic. The raw skin beneath was angry and bruised. His expression darkened when he saw it. No one spoke while he wrapped his cloak around her shoulders, not to hide her, but to warm the shaking she could not control. Then he angled his body between her and the doorway as new footsteps pounded in from the rain. A messenger skidded into the infirmary, drenched and panting. "Your Majesty, South Granaries confirmed moon rot in 3 bins. 2 pregnant females are cramping at Rivergate. Council elders demand immediate closed hearing for the healer." Alistair did not look away from Theodora when he answered. "Tell the council there will be no closed hearing." His next words cut through stone and storm alike. "At moonrise, we convene in open witness, and I will speak her name before every pack." The words struck the infirmary like a drawn blade laid flat across every throat. No one argued. No one even breathed loudly. The messenger bowed and ran back into the rain. Alistair turned to the senior medic. "Lock the southern stores. Post 2 neutral scribes at each granary gate and copy every seal mark before nightfall. If any sack disappears, I want the name of the guard who blinked. The medic pressed fist to heart and moved. Then Alistair looked at Theodora, and the command in him altered into something quieter but no less deliberate. Rivergate sent 2 pregnant females and 3 orphaned pups up from the pass. They are in the east watchtower because the infirmary is full. His gaze dropped briefly to her scraped wrists, to the bruising at her throat where iron had sat. Can you treat them there? Or do you need another healer with you? With you. Not under. Not instead of. Theodora's mouth went dry. I can do it. Then I go where you go. He did not touch her as they crossed the inner yard, though every guard they passed could feel the bond now and stared as if watching thunder walk on 2 legs. Rain came down in slanting sheets, drumming the slate roofs and flooding the seams between flagstones. The east watchtower rose from the curtain wall like a dark tooth, its wooden stair slick and half exposed to the storm. By the first landing, Theodora's borrowed cloak was soaked through and her hands were shaking hard enough that the satchel of bark knocked against her hip in uneven beats. Inside, the tower room smelled of wet wool, smoke, and fear. 2 small boys sat near the brazier with knees drawn to their chests, ears half shifted in distress, while a girl no older than 10 watched over them with a ferocity that did not belong on a child's face. On the pallet nearest the wall, a pregnant female lay curled around her belly, breath hitching every few seconds as cramps rippled through her. Theodora moved to her instantly. Name? Mara, the girl answered before the adult could. My mother is Mara. She says not to make noise, but she keeps biting her sleeve. Good, Theodora said, because children with tasks survived panic better than children with platitudes. You, brave one, count her breaths for me. Say the number every 5. She knelt, opened her satchel, and reached for the mortar. Her fingers slipped. The bowl tilted. A broad, scarred hand came down over the base, steadying it against the plank floor before it could spill. Alistair had crouched beside her without a word, palm braced, body angled so she still had full access to every pouch and packet. He did not take over. He only held the weight. Theodora stared at his hand for 1 beat too long. Kings did not kneel in tower rooms with rain running down their necks while disgraced healers mixed medicine. Kings dictated from dry halls and summoned outcomes. This one steadied her tools. I need fever bark crushed fine, silver leaf bruised, and willow resin warmed but not boiled, she said, testing him. He nodded once. When he reached toward the bark, he stopped halfway and looked at her first. May I? The question hit her harder than the storm wind screaming through the arrow slits. Permission had not belonged to her body in months. Not when they branded her. Not when they chained her. Not when men discussed confession as if it were weather. Yes, she managed. He ground bark with patient force, following her timing exactly. No corrections. No rank in it. When she snapped, slower, you'll scorch it, he adjusted without offense. When she said, lantern higher, he raised it and held still until his arm trembled. One of the boys began to cry silently, shoulders shaking. Theodora checked Mara's pulse, then the second pregnant female in the corner, and measured out drops with precision that left no room for panic. Between doses, she taught the girl how to cool her mother's wrists with damp cloth, how to ease a cramp without pressing the lower belly, how to watch for the dangerous gap between pain and bleeding. Through it all, Alistair remained where she placed him, sentinel and assistant both. Rain soaked the stairwell, and wind drove mist through the tower slit until the brazier hissed. He stripped off his outer cloak, wrung water from it, and then paused with it in both hands. May I put this around your shoulders? He asked. Theodora turned, startled again by the same careful restraint. You are the king. And you are freezing. She gave the smallest nod. He settled the heavy wool over her back, without letting his knuckles graze her neck mark, as if he knew exactly where touch would startle. The warmth hit slowly, then all at once. Mara's breathing steadied first. Then her mother's cramps began to space out, from every minute to every 3, then every 5. Not gone, but no longer climbing toward catastrophe. The second female, Isolde, took the tincture and kept it down. Color returned to her lips in thin, stubborn increments. Only when Theodora finally sat back on her heels did she realize how rigid her spine had been. Exhaustion moved in, heavy as winter. Alistair set the lantern on a crate and flexed his cramped fingers with a grimace that almost looked humanly embarrassed. "You were correct," he said. "I am useless with dosage ratios." "You did not ruin anything," she answered before she could stop herself. A corner of his mouth lifted, dry and brief. "Kings are useless at medicine but excellent at holding lanterns." Against every instinct, a startled breath of laughter escaped her. It sounded rusted, like a hinge forced open after long neglect, but it was real enough that Mara looked up in amazement and smiled for the first time since they entered. Silence settled after that. Not empty, just tired. The boys dozed against each other near the brazier. Wind rattled the shutter latch in irregular bursts. Theodora cleaned the mortar with rainwater and scraped the last of the paste into a covered cup for the midnight dose. Inside, her thoughts ran hot and bright and frightened. Do not mistake gentleness for safety. You know better. You know how quickly men become law and law becomes teeth. But he asked. He waited for your answer where others took and renamed taking as duty. He let your hands decide life and death in front of witnesses who could carry any story they wanted, and he did not cut you out to preserve his own image. You are still in danger. The court still wants a culprit. Nikolai still has forged records and hungry packs behind him. None of that vanished because one man held a lantern. Yet when he stood close, your pulse did not curl into dread. It steadied. If trust is a door, this is not crossing it. This is touching the latch with 2 fingers and admitting it exists. Alistair rose and offered her his hand up from the floor. She looked at it, then took it. His grip was firm, warm, and immediately released once she found her balance. A runner reached the top stair, drenched and panting. Moonbell in 10 minutes, council gathering in the outer tribunal ring. Elder Varen requests the accused be delivered kneeling. The old terror flared in her chest before she could suppress it. Alistair's expression went flat, with contained fury. Tell Elder Varen to wait. The runner swallowed and vanished. By the time the second moonbell rang, rain had thinned to a cold mist, and the clouds had torn enough for pale light to spill across the court. The moon tribunal ring stood beyond the main hall, open to the sky, circled by carved stones that recorded 3 centuries of oaths and betrayals in weathered runes. Torches burned blue-white in iron sconces. Representatives of all 6 packs filled the stepped tiers, cloaks dark with damp, faces sharpened by hunger and politics. At the center stone, a kneeling mat had been laid out like a deliberate insult. Theodora stopped when she saw it. 2 council guards approached with formal ropes. By order of Elder Varen, the accused will kneel during charges. One reached for her elbow. Alistair stepped between them so fast the motion blurred. Touch her again, he said softly, and you will beg the moon for a gentler sentence than mine. The guard froze, hand midair. Elder Varen rose from the council bench, robes heavy with silver braid. His voice carried, brittle with authority he thought absolute. Your Majesty forgets precedent. Disgraced healers stand below the circle. She will kneel, or she will be dragged. A hiss of agreement came from 2 elders behind him. One of them spat the word like venom. Child killer. Theodora felt the old reflex, the training of humiliation, trying to bend her spine. Head down. Make yourself small. Survive the hour. Her knees threatened to fold. Alistair did something no one in Ravencrest had seen in public for years. He reached to his throat, tore away the plain soldier's clasp he had worn since dawn, and let the disguise fall. Beneath it, black leather marked with the crown sigil caught torchlight. He stripped his gauntlets off and bared both forearms. Runes blazed to life across his skin, molten gold lines winding from wrist to elbow in ancient king script. Gasps broke across the tiers. Even the wolves along the perimeter lowered themselves to the stone. When he spoke, power threaded every word. Under blood-right law of Ravencrest, any who insult my sworn protected insult the crown. Any who attempt coercion outside witness challenge my rule directly. I accept that challenge. The ring went dead silent. Varen's mouth tightened. Sworn protected is not mate, not yet. No, Alistair said. It is older than mate in law and harder to break. I named her under my seal before witnesses in the infirmary. Ask your medics if you doubt me. The elder medic from earlier stood from the second tier, voice shaking but clear. Witnessed. Another healer rose. Witnessed. Then the captain who had knelt in shame at the infirmary stepped forward and hit fist to heart. Witnessed by Crown Guard. The momentum shifted, subtle but undeniable. The kneeling mat at the center suddenly looked less like tradition and more like evidence of intent. Varen tried again, sharper now. She is accused in the death of the late Luna's unborn child and endangerment of pack fertility. Closed review protects sensitive testimony. Closed review buries inconvenient truth. Alistair cut in. From this night forward, every accusation against Theodora Starfall is heard only in open moonlight with all packs present, all records read aloud and cross-examination by neutral healers from each allied territory. Any elder who refuses transparency recuses himself or is removed. Nikolai Ashford, seated among the visiting alphas, leaned forward with a smile too thin to be friendly. You rewrite procedure for one female and call it justice. Alistair turned his head just enough for the runes on his jawline to catch flame bright. I enforce procedure for the first time in months and call it overdue. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, not outrage this time, but recognition. Too many had lost litters. Too many had accepted verdicts delivered behind closed doors because grief made easy scapegoats. Varen signaled the guards anyway, desperate. Seize! Stand down, Alistair thundered. The command cracked across the ring with alpha force. The guards halted as if struck, chests heaving, eyes wide. No one moved another inch. Then, in a gesture more radical than any threat, Alistair stepped aside and opened space at his right hand, equal to where a war captain would stand. Theodora Starfall, he said, voice carrying to the highest tier. Take your place in this circle by your own will. Every gaze in the tribunal swung to her. Fear remained, coiled and real, but it no longer stood alone. She felt Mara's small face in memory, the weight of the mortar beneath his hand, the careful pause before every touch. She felt, too, the bond between them like a steady line drawn through storm water, not dragging, simply present. She walked past the kneeling mat without looking down. When she came to Alistair's side, she did not stand behind him. She stood level, shoulders square beneath his cloak, wrists raw and uncovered, chin lifted toward the moonlight. For the first time since the chains closed at sunrise, lowering her guard did not feel like surrender. It felt like choosing where to place her trust and being seen while she chose. The circle held for 3 long breaths. Then Elder Varen struck his staff against stone and forced the tribunal forward. Charges will be read, he said, voice clipped. Healer Theodora Starfall stands accused of malpractice under Moon Oath, concealment of failed treatment, and direct causation in the late Luna's loss. A scribe unrolled a narrow parchment and began reciting dates, doses, and witness marks in a monotone meant to sound neutral. Theodora listened with her jaw locked, because every line was almost right, and therefore more dangerous than a crude lie. The fever date matched. The herb ratios matched. The weather notation even matched: rain over the western ridge and frost in the low pens. But the sequence bent where it mattered. Her recommendation for grain quarantine had been replaced with a sedative notation. Her warning about cramping clusters had been cut entirely. Her signed request for a second examiner had vanished. Nikolai Ashford rose before the scribe reached the end. He did not wait for permission. "Ravencrest deserves full transparency," he said, and held up a leather satchel sealed in dark wax. "My envoys recovered additional healer records from your southern archive after this female fled lawful custody." The word fled landed like a hook. Around the ring, faces turned toward Theodora with fresh suspicion. Alistair did not move, yet his presence pressed outward in a low, controlled threat. "Recovered is a careful word," he said. "From which lockbox? Under which authority? With whose written leave?" Nikolai offered a thin smile. "From negligence, under necessity, with witness from 3 packs that still value unborn life." He broke the wax and spilled a stack of tablets and folded sheets onto the evidence stone. One by one, he raised them to the torchlight. Treatment logs with Theodora's name, dosage lists bearing her old healer knot, and finally a page marked with her seal impression beside the phrase, "induced expulsion." A murmur of revulsion rolled through the tears. Theodora felt cold settle under her skin even as her pulse hammered. She recognized the pressure of the seal, but not the hand that had pressed it. Too deep at the left edge, as if stamped by someone right-handed forcing an unfamiliar angle. Her own mark always rode high on the ring. This one sat low and crooked. "Forgery," she said, and hated how small the word sounded against a crowd primed for blame. Nikolai turned toward her with polished pity. "Then swear it under moon oath now. Swear you never used Black Cohosh concentrate on the late Luna." "I never used concentrate in pregnancy because it triggers uterine contraction." "Yet this record says you did." "This record is false." He spread his hands to the council. "You hear certainty from a branded oathbreaker while my evidence carries seals and dates. Decide which is more credible." Alistair stepped to the evidence stone and lifted the tablet without asking. Torchlight ran over carved lines and his expression hardened by degrees. He passed it to the neutral scribe from Greyfen, then to a healer envoy from Stonewater. "Read the grain notation in the margin," he said. The Greyfen scribe squinted, frowned, and read aloud. "Lot S17 remains fit for use after humidity drying." The healer envoy hissed quietly. "S17 was condemned in Stonewater 5 weeks ago for moonrot spread." Nikolai answered too quickly. "Regional contamination differs." The envoy shook her head. "Not by this strain. We issued warning marks to all allied territories." Theodora turned toward her, hope and dread colliding. "You sent warnings with silver wax and knot cord?" "Yes." "We never received them." Alistair's voice dropped into that dangerous calm she had begun to recognize as the edge of action. "Who handled courier intake at the South Gate that week?" A Ravencrest quartermaster stood slowly from the 3rd tier, face ash pale. "I did, my king. 2 satchels arrived with broken cords. I filed one and sent one to Elder Review." "Which elder?" The man swallowed. "Elder Varen." All eyes swung to the council bench. Varen's mouth tightened, then flattened. "Administrative triage is not conspiracy." Nikolai seized the opening at once. "This drift into procedural quibbling is exactly why your borders bleed, Alistair. While you defend one female, raiders hit your northern passes and your grain stores rot." His gaze sharpened. "I can deploy 200 fighters by tomorrow's dusk and secure your supply roads within the week." The offer hung there, seductive and poisonous. Alistair looked at him without blinking. "And your price?" "Transfer of custody." Nikolai did not bother to soften it now. Theodora Starfall stands trial under a neutral coalition, not a king compromised by mate impulse. "Surrender her to my custody at dawn, Accept Ashford military support, and your starving border packs live through winter. A hiss ran through the court, outrage braided with fear. Trade routes had already thinned. Everyone in the ring knew what another bad week of grain could do. Theodora understood then with brutal clarity that Nikolai's cruelty was disciplined, not chaotic. He was not trying merely to shame her. He was engineering a choice Alistair could not survive: hand over his mate and look weak to every rival, or keep her and let hunger turn allies into rebels. The records were only one blade, the fungus in the bins was the other. Inside, her thoughts came fast, bright, and merciless. This is the trap. Not guilt, not innocence, scarcity. He is building a famine and selling the cure at the same table where he calls you cursed. If Alistair defends you, mothers count empty stores and curse your name by nightfall. If he yields you, every elder learns that pressure breaks the crown and no sworn protection means anything. You cannot let this become only a battle between two males with armies behind them. You are the one who understands the pattern in the cramps, the smell in spoiled dust, the way false records mimic true handwriting but fail at touch and timing. Fear is loud, but method is louder. Breathe, observe, pick one thread and pull until the weave tears in public. By the first hour after moonrise, cold had deepened and mist pooled low across the stones. Runners began arriving in a relentless sequence, each one carrying another piece of pressure. South Granary 4 sealed. Rivergate requesting additional healers. 2 more pregnant females reporting abdominal cramping after evening meal. A border den refusing Ravencrest grain allotment unless verified by neutral mark. Every message went through the central scribe, and every message widened the fracture line in the crowd. Nikolai watched each report with predatory patience. Alistair issued orders as quickly as they came. Split inspection teams by pack, rotate guards every 2 hours, no elder oversight without scribe witness. Send word to Rivergate that Theodora's treatment protocol from the tower is to be repeated exactly, no substitutions. He did not consult the council before speaking her protocol, and that alone provoked fresh outrage. You place kingdom medicine in her hands again? One elder barked. She caused this panic, another said. Nikolai's voice slid through theirs like oil over water. Not panic. Consequence. The moon does not bless hidden mates and tainted healers. The bond between Theodora and Alistair thrummed under her skin each time his focus snapped toward threat, a low current that made distance feel temporary even when he stood 3 paces away, arguing law with men twice his age. It should have frightened her more than it did. Instead, it steadied her breathing when the tears blurred and her old humiliation tried to rise. She forced herself back to evidence: tablet angle, ink composition, drying patterns. She asked for the nearest torch, held one of Nikolai's pages close enough to smell it, and caught the telltale sting of gall ink fixed with vinegar resin from Ashford marshes, not Ravencrest pine soot. Subtle, convincing to everyone but a healer trained to identify infusion residues by scent. She lifted the page higher. This ink is not from our scriptoria. Varen scoffed. Ink trade crosses territories. Not in winter blockades, she replied, and not with this resin. Ravencrest stores use pine gum. This has marsh vinegar and iron gall from reed pits. Nikolai shrugged. Perhaps your own scribes acquired better materials. Then test it. She met the neutral envoys one by one. Heat the edge over silver flame. Pine soot blisters dull. Marsh gall beads, blue. A Stonewater scribe stepped forward despite Varen's glare. He held the corner to a ritual flame. Tiny beads rose in the ink line, then flashed a faint blue tint before blackening. A ripple went through the seats. Nikolai's jaw tightened for the first time. Alistair did not smile. Continue, he said to Theodora, And the simple trust in those two syllables hit deeper than any public declaration. Attraction under fear was not soft, it was flint and ache, and the bewildering certainty of being seen at the exact moment she would have hidden. She could feel him listening for her next breath, even while he tracked 20 threats at once. When she reached for the second tablet, his hand moved near hers but did not touch, and offered anchor rather than a claim. She did not take it. She did not need to. Knowing it was there changed the shape of the air between them. Nikolai's patience snapped into motion. If this spectacle continues, people will die while you debate ink, he said sharply. I renew my offer now. Aid for custody. Decide before dawn, Alistair, or I withdraw my troops and publicly declare Ravencrest moon-forsaken. That declaration is yours to make, Alistair replied. It will not make it true. Nikolai's smile returned, colder. Truth follows survival. He lifted 2 fingers toward the upper tiers. A man Theodora had taken for a minor envoy shifted position near the scribe bench. Another moved near the torch rack. Small movements. Coordinated. Awareness prickled along her spine. Your Majesty, she said quietly, not taking her eyes off the envoy. His men are placed inside the ring. Alistair's gaze flicked once and sharpened. Crown guard, inward arc. Boots struck stone as Ravencrest guards tightened formation. The envoys froze, then forced nonchalance too late to look innocent. One bolted for the side stair. He was tackled before he reached the archway, and a packet burst from his sleeve onto the stones, dark granules that smelled of rot and damp cellars. Theodora dropped to one knee and pinched a fragment between her fingers. Moon-rot fungus, dried and powdered for easy spread. Nikolai stood perfectly still, while half the court shouted at once. Planting evidence, he said over the noise. Inside a tribunal ring? Alistair asked, voice like ice. Try again. Another guard dragged in a second envoy from behind the wolf pens, this one carrying waxed cords, counterfeit seal stamps, and 3 blank healer forms already marked with Theodora's copied seal. The crowd's outrage changed timbre, from accusation to alarm. Then the third strike landed. A runner crashed through the east arch so hard he slid on wet stone. Rivergate collapse, he gasped. 3 pregnant females in active distress. Sudden onset after night meal. Cramping severe. One cannot stand. They are being carried here because local healers refuse to treat without tribunal order. For one suspended beat, no one moved. Nikolai spoke first, silk over steel. How tragic. Your protected healer has another chance to prove herself. Theodora rose, already reaching for her satchel, and 2 council guards stepped in front of her with ropes drawn tight. By elder order, one said, voice shaking, the accused remains contained until verdict. The cries of the arriving females echoed from the corridor beyond the ring, raw and terrified, and the tribunal tipped from political theater into emergency. Alistair's runes blazed brighter along his forearms as he stepped toward the guards. Nikolai's hidden men shifted near the exits. The moon rode high above the stones, pitiless and clear, while Theodora stood at the center of law, bond, and sabotage with medicine in her bag and no sanctioned right to use it. Theodora moved first. Do not touch him, she said when Alistair's runes flared and his shoulders squared toward the guards. Her voice cut through the shouting because it carried command instead of plea. She lifted her satchel into clear view and faced the council line. If those females lose their litters while you debate custody, that blood sits on this ring, not on me. One guard hesitated, rope still taut between his fists. The other looked to Elder Varen, waiting for permission to force her down. Nikolai stepped into the pause with predatory calm. Compelling theater, he said, then let us be lawful. Treat them here, in full witness, with no room for hidden methods. If she refuses, you have your admission. The trap was elegant. If Theodora failed, Nikolai won. If she succeeded quietly, he could still call it luck and keep the forged records alive. From the east corridor came a strained cry, then another, the ragged rhythm of cramping that had already gone too far. Two healers pushed through with makeshift litters, three pregnant females shuddering under wet blankets, faces gray with pain. One clutched her belly with both hands and bit her lip hard enough to leave a red crescent. Another could not stop shaking. The tribunal broke into motion and panic at once. Wolves along the perimeter whined and paced. Scribes scrambled to keep tablets dry as mist thickened over the stones. A torch stand toppled when someone stumbled backward, blue-white fire licking across rain-dark flagstone before a guard stamped it out. Alistair's voice cracked over the chaos. "Clear the center, now." Crown guards shoved benches aside, forming a hard ring around the patients. Neutral envoys protested being displaced, then fell silent when Alistair turned his gaze on them. The amber in his irises brightened, no longer fully masked. Nikolai did not retreat. He drifted 2 steps closer to the evidence stone, where his satchel still sat half open, and gave a tiny hand signal toward the upper tier. Theodorus saw it. 2 of his men moved instantly, one kicking sand over a second torch base, the other slipping behind the rear guard line toward her blind side. She pivoted, but the man was already on her, forearm locking across her shoulders, cloth pressed toward her mouth with the sour smell of crushed sedative root. Peril arrived as pressure, breath, and narrowing air. She drove her heel down onto his instep, twisted her body the way chain drills had taught her in a crueler context, and slammed the back of her head into his chin. The cloth dropped. He cursed and reached for her throat collar by reflex, forgetting there was no iron there now. Alistair started toward her, killing intent written in every line of him. Nikolai raised his voice like a whip. "If the king intervenes physically before challenge terms are set, this tribunal is void." The old laws mattered, and everyone in that ring knew it. One wrong move could fracture all 6 packs by dawn. Theodora snatched the fallen cloth, flung it into the brazier, and smoke surged up bitter and green. "Challenge accepted," she said, breathing hard. "But by healer's oath, not your staging. Witnessed treatment, witnessed diagnosis, witnessed source." She dropped to her knees between the litters before anyone could stop her. Inside, her thoughts ran sharp and immediate. This is the knife edge. If I wait for permission, they die. If I act without proof, they call it sorcery and confirm every accusation. I know this pain pattern. Too synchronized, too fast, too much lower abdominal locking after grain. Not infection, not random miscarriage cascade, toxin. He counted on fear to make us choose a culprit before we choose method. I will not give him that. I am done surviving by shrinking. I am done being careful while other women pay the price. Let them watch every step. Let them hate me while I do it. Let them finally see what poison looks like when it leaves nowhere to hide. "Silverleaf," she snapped. "Mortar, clean water. 1 witness from each pack, right beside me." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Mara's mother from the watchtower, steadier now and still pale, pushed through the crowd and held out a wrapped packet with shaking hands. "I kept the extra leaves," she whispered. A Stonewater healer came forward, then Grey Fen, then 2 more, wary but unwilling to stand idle. Theodora turned to Alistair. "I need your dagger." He pulled the blade from his belt and offered handle first. She looked directly at him. "Do not stop me." His jaw flexed once. "I will guard the circle." She cut her palm in one clean line, blood welling dark in moonlight. Gasps broke across the tears, but she ignored them, grinding Silverleaf into paste and letting her blood bead into it until the mixture glowed faintly, like starlight caught in wet clay. Forbidden diagnostic rite. Star healer work older than council law. Elder Varen surged to his feet. Blasphemy. Halt this at once. Sit down, Alistair said without looking away from Theodora. She painted 3 thin lines of the paste across her own forearm, then pressed her hand gently to the first female's lower abdomen, not forceful, just steady. The ritual answered immediately. Black threads surfaced beneath Theodora's skin, branching from wrist to elbow like ink spilled through clear water. Not blood, not bruise. Drawn toxin pattern. A collective intake of breath circled the tribunal. She moved to the second female, more black filamenting. Third. Same spread, same rhythm, external exposure signature almost identical. Theodora rose, arm lifted high so every tear could see the evidence climbing her skin. Her voice carried raw and bright. This is moonrot infusion, ingested, distributed through grain dust. It is not miscarriage by healer error. It is poisoning. Nikolai laughed once, but it cracked at the edges. A convenient trick from a desperate woman. She stepped toward him, blood still dripping from her palm to the stone. Then stand under oath with me. If I lie, let the moon mute my gift forever. If I speak truth, you stand judged by crown and goddess. Silence slammed down. Even the wind seemed to hold. Nikolai's mask fell. I do not submit to peasant theatrics. Not peasant, Theodora said. Star healer oath, ancient and binding. You challenged my credibility. I am challenging your soul. Within minutes, the treated female's breathing had eased by small but undeniable degrees. Cramping intervals widened. One unclenched her hands and sobbed with relief into a healer's shoulder. That visible change hit the crowd harder than argument. Nikolai read the shift and chose violence. He snarled, shoved a guard aside, and shifted mid-stride, half-wolf form tearing through his composure as claws broke from his fingers and his jaw lengthened with a feral snap. He lunged across the ring toward Theodora, not to debate, to silence. She was already moving. Theodora slammed both blood-lit hands onto the tribunal stone and spoke the root-bind runes her teachers had sworn never to use for politics. Silver lines raced outward through old carvings, then erupted upward in hard arcs that wrapped Nikolai's legs like forged chains. He hit the ground on one knee with a roar, ripping at the glowing restraints, but each struggle tightened the bind. The ring exploded into shouts. Alistair crossed the distance like a released storm. He did not go to Theodora first. He honored the law she had invoked. He seized Nikolai by the collar and shoulder, drove him flat against the evidence stone, and pinned him while crown guards closed in. Nikolai thrashed, satchel strap tearing under his own weight. Tablets and folded pages spilled across wet stone, skidding into torchlight. Forged healer forms, counterfeit seals, waxed cords, a ledger marked with grain lot numbers and payout notations beside courier names. Stonewater's envoy snatched one page and shouted, "These are Ashford disbursements for compromised stores." Grayfin's scribe held up another. "Copied seal matrices, dozens." Nikolai bared his teeth at Alistair, voice ragged with fury. "You would burn a kingdom for a disgraced female." Theodora walked to the edge of the bind circle, arms still streaked black, chin high despite the tremor in her legs. "No," she said. "We are ending the one you poisoned." Alistair's answering words were iron. By moon law and witness, Nikolai Ashford is stripped, banished, and marked rogue. No one challenged him. Crown guards hauled Nikolai upright as he spat curses and fought the restraints. Theodora's rune chains held until iron cuffs replaced them. Elder Varen opened his mouth, closed it, then sank back onto the bench, suddenly very old. By the time the moon tilted west, the sentence was carried out in full sight at the eastern border stones. A heated exile sigil was pressed to Nikolai's forearm, brief and final, and his howl echoed off the cliffs as guards turned him outward. Spear points drove him step by step beyond the marked line where Ravencrest law ended. He stumbled once, looked back with naked hatred, and found 6 packs watching without moving to help. Then he vanished into the dark pines. When the guards returned, Alistair did not go to the council first. He came to Theodora, who stood wrapped in his cloak with dried blood on her hand and black diagnostic threads fading from her skin. He stopped 1 pace away, giving her room to choose. "You held the kingdom together tonight," he said quietly. She met his gaze, exhausted and shaking, and no longer bowed. "I held a mirror up to what was already breaking." Around them, scribes gathered the exposed records for Dawn review. Neutral healers organized antidote preparation from her protocol, and representatives of every pack signed witness marks beside Nikolai's sentence. The court that had called her curse now moved by her instructions. Moonlight silvered the temple clearing above Ravencrest, turning the old altar stone into a pale blade laid across the earth. The gathered packs stood in a wide ring at respectful distance, cloaks damp from mist, wolves quiet at their heels. No one shouted now, no one argued law. After the tribunal and the border sentence, a solemn hush held the night together. Theodora stepped onto the carved moon sigil at the clearing's center with Alistair beside her. Her palm had been cleaned and bound, though a faint rust-red line still marked where she had cut for the rite. On a lower stone, neutral scribes arranged the physical proof from the trial in ordered rows. Nikolai's torn satchel emptied and inventoried, forged healer tablets tied with witness cord, copied seal matrices wrapped in cloth, and the recovered moon-rot packet sealed in glass for council assay at dawn. Nothing hidden. Nothing missing. Alistair faced her, not the crowd. Torchlight slid over the runes on his forearms, now steady and warm instead of battle-bright. "I can claim by Kingright," he said, voice low enough that only the first ranks heard clearly. "I will not." He sank to one knee, then lifted his chin and bared the strong line of his throat to her, the most vulnerable offering a wolf king could make. "Choose me, Theodora Starfall, or refuse me, and I will still keep my oath to protect you." The words struck through all the noise she still carried in her bones. Chains, accusations, the kneeling mat waiting to humiliate her. In this clearing, under witness, power had shifted into her hands and stayed there. Inside, her thoughts trembled and clarified in the same breath. I was sold as atonement, branded as failure, taught that survival meant yielding before anyone could force me lower. He could have taken this moment and called it destiny. He did not. He asked in front of every pack that once measured my worth by rumor. The fear is still real. Trust is still a choice, not a spell. But I have watched him stand between me and a corrupt council, and I have watched him step back so I could stand for myself. I know the scent of his patience now, the shape of his restraint, the way his anger bends toward protection instead of control. I am not choosing rescue. I am choosing partnership. I am choosing the male who said my name when silence was safer. She reached down, fingers brushing his jaw. "I choose you," she said, freely, in witness. A shudder moved through him, fierce and restrained. "Mine," he whispered. She answered without looking away. "Yours." Then she touched his shoulder in invitation and tipped her head, exposing the curve where neck met collarbone. The consent was clear as law. Alistair stood, one hand framing the back of her neck, the other at her waist, holding but never trapping. When his teeth sank into the junction of her shoulder and throat, pain flashed bright and immediate, a clean fire that made her knees soften. She gripped his forearm and breathed through the first sharp pull. Heat followed a heartbeat later, pouring through the wound in liquid waves, not erasing pain, but transforming it, turning hurt into a deep, resonant thrum that spread through her chest and down her spine. The bond that had sparked in the infirmary now opened fully, vast and luminous. Amber and silver threads rose between them, visible to every witness, spiraling from his sternum to hers like living light. Gasps sounded around the ring, reverent this time. He lifted his mouth from her neck. Blood brighted his lips, eyes feral with devotion rather than hunger for dominance. "Mate," he said, the word rough with awe. Theodora's breath shook. She was not done. "My turn," she whispered. She set both hands on his shoulders, pulled him down to her height, and bit into the heavy muscle just above his clavicle, hard enough to break skin and draw royal blood. He made a low, startled sound that shifted into a growl of acceptance, arms locking around her as the mark sealed. The answering surge hit them both at once. Their runes ignited. His gold, hers a newly awakened silver-white tracing faint stars along her inner wrists, and then softened, sinking beneath skin like vows absorbed into bone. "Mine," she said against him, stronger now. "Yours," he answered instantly. "Mate." The last word settled the clearing. The wolves around the ring lowered themselves and bowed their heads. Pack by pack, warriors and elders followed, fists to hearts, not to him alone, to both of them. Alistair pressed his forehead to hers, breathing hard, and for several long seconds neither moved. In the completed bond she felt him fully. Grief for the Luna he had lost, rage at the sabotage he had not seen soon enough, iron discipline, and beneath it all an almost unbearable tenderness he had hidden behind strategy. He felt her too, old humiliation, stubborn courage, healer focus, and the raw relief of being believed. Nothing was concealed now, yet nothing was diminished. "You said my name when no one else would," she murmured. His thumb traced the edge of her new mark. "I will speak it first, every dawn." By first light, the great hall of Ravencrest was full again, but the mood had changed from tribunal hostility to deliberate reconstruction. Rain had stopped. Cold sunlight poured through the eastern arches onto long tables covered in tablets, ledgers, seal stamps, and grain manifests. Neutral scribes from all 6 packs read every contested record aloud. The forged pages from Nikolai's satchel were tagged as false and archived for interpack notice. The powder packet tested positive for concentrated moonrot. Theodora supervised the assay herself with Stonewater's envoy at her shoulder. Counterfeit seal matrices were logged, then melted in a brazier before witnesses so they could not be reused. A runner from Rivergate arrived mud-splashed and hoarse. All 3 females stabilized overnight, cramping reduced, no further bleeding. They request continued doses under Healer Starfall's protocol. Another report followed from the southern stores. Lot S-17 and adjacent bins burned under joint guard. No contaminated dust remains. Replacement grain from Grayfin accepted after inspection. Alistair nodded once and turned to Theodora before answering either report. "Your orders?" "Not deference for show. Governance." She rose beside him, cloak traded for ceremonial black and silver, her new mark visible at her throat. "From this day, no grain enters Ravencrest without 2-pack inspection and healer sign-off. Courier cords are to be checked at gate and logged in duplicate, 1 copy to council, 1 to infirmary. Any broken seal is investigated before distribution, not after loss." No one objected. Elder Varen stood when summoned, face drawn and hands unsteady. Under Moon Oath, he admitted withholding Stonewater's warning packet and authorizing the Black Stair transfer request through his clerk. He claimed panic, triage, pressure from allied demands. The council listened in grim silence. His guilt was not equal to Nikolai's sabotage, but it had fed it. By unanimous vote of the 6-pack representatives, he was stripped of elder seat and placed under guarded exile to a remote monastery archive, barred from civil authority for life. The 2 guards who had discussed the forced confession identified the order chain and were dismissed from service, The younger one, who had brought the bucket and warned her to sign, was spared imprisonment after full testimony and reassigned to border labor under supervision. Then came the accord. 6 pack leaders stepped forward one by one to press signet rings into hot wax beneath the new charter, shared granary inspections, open hearing law for healer accusations, rotating neutral scribes at all tribunals, and emergency antidote stores maintained jointly under Ravencrest protection. Nikolai Ashford's territory was formally marked rogue until new leadership petitioned for lawful reinstatement. At the final table, Alistair lifted a circlet worked with moonstone and dark steel. He did not place it on her immediately. "Theodora Starfall," he said, voice carrying through the hall and out to the sunlit court beyond. "Healer, truth witness, my chosen mate. Will you stand as Star Luna of Ravencrest and keeper of the Moon Infirmary, with authority equal to Crown command in all matters of pack health and sanctuary law?" She held his gaze. "I will." When he set the circlet on her head, the hall erupted in a sound she had never imagined hearing for herself. Not fear, not gossip, but oath. Fists struck hearts in unison. We witness, we restore, we protect. Later, in the rebuilt sanctuary courtyard, children raced between herb beds while Mara shouted timing rules from the fountain edge as if she had always belonged there. Her mother, stronger now, sorted silver leaf bundles with 2 apprentice healers who no longer flinched from Theodora's instructions. The captain who had once grabbed her arm stood watch at the gate with disciplined humility, and when their eyes met, he bowed without performance, then returned to duty. Sunrise warmed the eastern stones. Theodora stood beneath the arch with one hand resting over the quiet new life she had confirmed in herself at dawn, tiny as a heartbeat and fiercely wanted. Alistair came behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist and kissed the mark at her throat with reverence. He spoke into her skin, clear enough for the waking court to hear. "Theodora Starfall, my mate, my queen." This time, the kingdom answered her name like a promise kept.